I came across this amazing property. It is cash flowing just the way I like it, but I just found out that in order to acquire that property, I have to be willing to take in the tenants or at least deal with the existing tenants. Is that a dilemma that you're dealing with right now and you don't know what to do? Well, you came to the right episode because we're gonna cover that exactly today. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode. If this is your first time tuning into TheBestWayToInvest, this is your channel for real estate education. So today I'm going to cover something that it goes through everyone's mind, everyone who has ever come across a nice, great investment property, but then eventually they have to face the dilemma and make a decision on whether you want to keep the existing tenants or just get a new tenant yourself, right? And for that, what we're going to do, we're going to jump straight into my iPad to figure it out and do the right analysis. All right, so here we are, and what we're gonna make a nice list of pros and cons, right? So let's see, we have pros for keeping the tenant after you acquire the property, or cons. So one of the pros that you get is that you will get income right away, right? So income right away, income here. And why is that good, especially if you have a mortgage? Well, if you're acquiring a nice tenant that comes in, the income is going to flow right away, and you don't have to worry about any vacancy rates or having to worry about making a mortgage payment out of your pocket while you wait for that right tenant to come in place, because it is already existing in there. And that's step one, right? And the second advantage that you get out of it is that you don't have to do any renovations whatsoever. Why? Because I'm sure, as you know, things change, trends changes all the time. And if you have a tenant that has been living in that property for quite a long time, chances are that tenant is pretty satisfied, it's pretty happy, and therefore they're not going to demand any changes because you just simply taken it over, right? And therefore you can save money on renovation, whether it's a major renovation or something that is cosmetic, which can still cost you a couple of hundreds, if not even a couple of $1,000s. So that's on the pro side. On the con side is that, hey, you might not want to inherit a tenant if it's a really bad tenant. Maybe that's the first reason why the seller is trying to get rid of that property in the first place, because maybe they try everything they could to get rid of this tenant or to keep up with the maintenance and everything, and it's just a headache. And what they're doing is they just want to get rid of the property once and for all, right? So if you're buying a property that comes with a bad tenant, that might be something that you might want to think about it twice, right? And the second disadvantage or a con of getting an existing tenant is that there's a high chance that they're probably not paying market rent. Why? Because think about it this way, right? So market rent. This person maybe has lived in the property for over 10 years. They started off with a certain rent, and because they're great and they're always paid on time, the existing landlord, or the seller in this case, just didn't want to raise the rent. Why? They're happy, I'm getting money, I have no need to increase the rent, so everybody's happy. But before moving forward, that's something that you really want to ask yourself and you need to consider. Do I want to keep a tenant that is excellent and it's great, and I know for a fact that it's always going to pay me on time? Or do I want to risk losing this tenant, increasing the rent, but maybe chancing getting a person that may or may not pay the rent on time? You go through the great qualification process, but in the end is that the future, it's somewhat uncertain and you never know what could happen, right? So those are the two dilemmas that a lot of you might be facing. In fact, it's one of the dilemmas that one of my students is currently facing right now. So what I decided to do, there's truly not a right or wrong answer to this. What I can do is just to simply share the approach that I took when I came across situations like this. So we're going to talk about the acquisition of my 17 unit, and we're also going to talk about something that happened when I was trying to expand and also did a purchase of a single family home. So we have single family home, and we have SFH for short, right? So in either one of these scenarios, whether you're buying a multifamily complex or whether you're buying a single family complex, you always have to leverage your power team, right? Your power team could be anyone from your attorney, from your realtor, from your property manager, to create a win-win situation. So what happened in this case, we're going to start off with the single family. So I invested in this property where the tenant has been there for quite a long time, and he was an excellent tenant. So it turns out that the seller had this property manager who also wound up becoming my property manager after I acquired the property. And in my conversations with my property manager, what he said was, she is paying below market rent, but she has been there a long time and she has never missed a payment, and she has never made a late payment. So that's definitely something that you want to consider. But at the end of the day, the seller didn't have a mortgage and I had a mortgage. So that's something that I needed to think about in terms of what I needed to do. So I asked my property manager to run the comps and see what's the market rent going on right now. And he found out that the market rent for an area like that, where I invested in that property, was $1,200. And the tenant at the time was actually paying $900. So she was paying way below market rent. And so in the end, I had to take care of a mortgage, otherwise I have to foreclose, but I didn't want to let go of a good tenant. So what we decided to do, we entered negotiations after I purchased the property. So my property manager made sure he was following the local laws, the regulations, because you definitely have to respect those. And he sat down and he had a conversation with the tenant, and he said, no, you're actually paying way below market rent, and you already know that. Unfortunately, the new buyer needs to increase the rent because she has the mortgage that she needs to pay. And this is a great location, but it will be completely up to you to decide whether you agree with the market rent and you want to stay, or whether you want to leave. If you want to leave, you have to let us know 60 to 90 days in advance. I forgot what was the time frame. I think it was 90 days that we gave her to decide, and maybe let her start her new search and maybe move out to another place, or just simply stay. But if she were to stay, we actually worked out a payment plan. So we gave her 6 months to slowly pay off the difference of the $900 all the way up to the $1,200. And 6 months later, that's when we fully increased the rent to $1,200, and she has never missed the payment, right? So that's the negotiation that we did at the time, and it worked out perfectly fine. Again, you always have to follow the local rules and regulation and work with your power team, in this case my property manager. Now on to the multifamily, the 17 unit right here. I also worked very closely with my property manager, who also happened to be my realtor. So after I took over the property, we just decided to look into the rent rolls, right, and see what really happened, right? So when you're dealing with such a large complex, you get to see a little bit of everything, right? You'll have tenants that are always paying on time, but sometimes you'll deal with tenants that they're not so great, right? And you might probably wondering, well, how do you know that for a fact? Because you're just inheriting a property and inheriting a bunch of new tenants. It's very easy. You ask to see the rent rolls, or what they call income statements. So when you ask to see the income statements, you will see every month something that they call late fees, right? And that's your cue to see, okay, which are the tenants or the apartments that are not, or the houses that are not literally paying on time, and you get to decide whether that's something you want to deal with or not, right? And if that's the case, let's say you don't want to do that because it is stressful, it's a waste of resources on my property manager to have to keep going back to collect rent, and then you just simply work it out with your property manager. You might want to have to check with a real estate attorney to make sure that all the local rules and regulations are being followed, and that's when you decide and you just provide the notification and say, you know what, we're under a new management, we have a new owner now who has just recently acquired this complex of 17 units, and then you want to make sure that you want to decide that or not. And then same thing as with the single family tenant, you give them the new rules and you ask them if they want to comply, if they're willing to comply or not, and if not, then feel free to move out and look for another place that could meet that criteria that could benefit you, right? And that's the best approach that I could suggest that my property managers and I had actually followed to come up with this win-win situation where I don't have to deal with a loss of a good tenant, but at the same time I didn't have to deal with a bad tenant at the same time. and that everyone is happy. My tenants is also happy. It's happy with the place that they're living, and they're also comfortable financially to be able to keep up with the rental payments, and that you also can meet your financial obligations with the lender as well. So if you find this episode helpful, please do not forget to hit the like button so you can help this episode rank and help others like you who are looking for information of this kind. And while I still have you here, do not forget to check this episode right here. That's going to help you complement everything we just covered today. And that's all I have for you today. Take good care of yourself, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.